Good evening, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. I'm Anne-Marie Nieves of Get Red PR. Today, we're bringing together two influential names in the book world to celebrate a special new book out this week. It is Goodnight from Paris, which I'm sure many of you have seen. So let me make some quick introductions. Today, we have the magnificent Leslie Zemeckis. She is a best-selling author, actress, and award-winning documentarian. Critically acclaimed films include Behind the Burlicue, the true story of old-time burlesque in America, Bound by Flesh, about conjoined twins Daisy and Violet Hilton, and Mabel Tiger Trainer, chronicling the extraordinary world of the first female tiger trainer, Mabel Stark. Her current film, Grandes Horizontales, about the lives and loves of 19th century courtesans, is in Paris, has won numerous Best Documentary Awards at festivals throughout the world. She has acted in film and television opposite Steve Carell, Tom Hanks, Richard Lawson, Colin Firth, and Mickey Rourke. Zemeckis is the author of 3 bestsellers, Behind the Burlicue, The Definitive Oral History of Burlesque. I love that. Goddess of Love Incarnate, The Life of Striptease Lily St. Cyr, and Feuding Fan Dancers about Sally Rand, Faith Bacon, and the golden age of the showgirl. She writes a monthly book column in the Montecito Journal. I'm sure very many of you read that, and is the founder of the program Stories Matter, sponsored by SBIFF with professional female authors, mentoring the next generation of female storytellers. Honored for her work inspiring women, Zemeckis will be awarded the Ellis Island Medal of Honor in 2023. In part for sharing and preserving stories of women who were once marginalized and stigmatized. The medal is officially recognized by both the houses of Congress and is one of our nation's most prestigious awards. Welcome, Leslie. And now we have Miss Jane Healey. She is the author of The Beantown Girls, a Washington Post and Amazon charts bestseller. The Secret Stealers, which was an Amazon First Reads editor's pick, and Historical Novel Society's editor's choice. And her debut, The Saturday Evening Girls Club. Goodnight from Paris is her newly released novel from Lake Union Publishing. Jane is also the host of Historical Happy Hour, which I know many of you join every single month. It's a monthly webinar and podcast featuring interviews with premier historical fiction authors and their latest novels. She lives outside of Boston with her husband, 2 daughters, cat and dog, who won't be joining us today. Thank you. Enjoy.
Oh, Jane, I love this book. It's such a sweeping book. And what it reminded me of and made me think about a lot is how one person can make a difference, especially in the face of evil. And I think we forget that.
Yes.
And to me, that was so amazing. And I wondered, like, what inspired you? What was the inspiration for this story?
Well, it's funny. I was doing research for The Secret Stealers, my 3rd novel. And first of all, too, I have to say, thank you so much for doing this tonight and helping me launch this book. Leslie, I'm
so excited.
Yes, I'm so excited. And if you don't follow Leslie on Instagram, she's a huge supporter of the book community, and you all need to do that because I love your Instagram so much. It's one of my favorite accounts, and I learn about books and travel and everything else. So thank you for doing this. And as for the inspiration for the story, when I was researching The Secret Stealers, I came across Drue Leyton, the Hollywood actress's name, in a couple of sources. And I learned that she was this expatriate in France during the war, and she lived this extraordinary life, took a lot of risks for her country, and I had left Hollywood for love. And like you said, it was one of those that, like, this woman's life was almost stranger than fiction. And she was feisty and heroic and just an amazing personality. And I wasn't planning on writing a World War II novel. As we know, there's a lot of World War II out there, but her story and the challenge of writing biographical fiction and sharing her story with the world was just too good to pass up. So I had to at least pitch it to my editors, and thankfully they said yes.
Well, yeah, I'm glad they did too. So
Yeah.
Now, historical research requires a lot of research. one, how did you do your research, and was there a lot on her?
You know, it's interesting. There wasn't a lot on her. She was kind of an up and coming starlet. She wasn't a huge star. The Charlie Chan movies had kind of been her first big break. So I had to, you know, I found some, of course, articles, newspapers.com, New York Times, and then I found in the Holocaust Museum archives in DC, they had a number of her letters from during the wartime digitized. So that was incredibly helpful. And then she did write a small autobiography, and it was published in 1946, and it was out of print, but I found it on eBay. A British seller was selling an original copy, and that really helped me kind of sort of shape the timeline of the novel and figure out the big plot points in her life, because I really wanted to honor her life story and not stray too much. It's of course a fictionalized book. It's inspired by her. It's not her, but I wanted to stick to the facts as we do in historical fiction as much as possible.
So in her autobiography, did it have her voice, or did you really had to dig for it elsewhere?
The
novel, she comes across.
Well, thank you. I hope I captured her voice. The autobiography was very helpful because you really got a sense of her personality and conversations she had and relationships she had. And then also her letters. Her letters were very detailed. It's, you know, letter writing is such a lost art, but her letters home, her letters to Jacques when he went off to war, really gave me an insight into who she was as a person.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's lots of stranger than fiction bits in your. Can you talk about that? I love stuff like that so much.
I do too. Thank you. And actually, the most stranger than fiction piece that I read about when I was researching Secret Stealers was sometime after Pearl Harbor, the Germans rounded up several hundred American women living in France and arrested them. And they said, we're doing this because the Americans are arresting all these German women in America, all these German immigrants, which was, of course, a lie. And so they rounded up all these women, they arrested them, they put them on buses, and they drove them to a zoo outside of Paris. And they were imprisoned in the monkey house there. And actually, their family and friends, for the few days they were in prison there, would pay 5 francs and shout over the fence to their loved ones about, like, you know, bring me more underwear or like whatever they needed. And then from there, after the monkey house, they were sent, this group of women were sent to another prison camp in the mountains outside of, it was called Vittel, France, in the mountains of France. It was monitored by the Red Cross, so it wasn't as harsh as some of the horrific concentration camps you read about. They were treated relatively well, but they were still imprisoned. And Drue was one of them, along with Sylvia Beach, the owner of Shakespeare and Company, and several other prominent American women. So that story was just so wild to me. Like the fact that they were like on cots in the monkey house, they were complaining about the smell of monkey pee, and like it was like this comedy and tragedy at the same time. Right. And I was like, that I have to write about that. That is just crazy. So
yeah, it's like you couldn't make it up.
You can't make it up. It's unbelievable.
Now, Drue, from looking at pictures that you've shared, and I know you're going to share some, she looks like, she reminds me of Carole Lombard. She's absolutely gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
She was a rising star. As you said, she did the Charlie Chan movies, but she left it. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Why?
You know, I get that question a lot, and already people ask, and my theory is she was a little bit disillusioned with Hollywood. Like she had started she was working on Broadway and in the West End in London before the war started. She met her soon-to-be husband Jacques in New York when she was working on Broadway, and I think she fell head over heels in love with him. And so I think she left Hollywood behind for love, and she not only fell in love with him, but I think she fell in love with Paris. She fell in love with France, and that was her, you know, her adopted home. So I think that's why she left it all behind. I think she just wanted a new chapter.
Awesome. So, so when Jacques goes off to war, she becomes a radio broadcaster for the Voice of America, which was heard here, correct? It was heard by Americans.
It was heard by Americans, yes. So she would broadcast in the middle of the night, so that Americans could listen. And she was one of the first reporters on the continent of Europe to tell what was really happening in Europe at the time. And she became so good at the job that the Nazis actually put a bounty on her head and said, when we occupy France, you will be executed. And they announced that on German radio multiple times. And she still kept broadcasting, which is pretty amazing too.
You have in there, you mentioned Dorothy Thompson, who was sort of a mentor to her. Can you talk about her? She's such an interesting person.
Such an interesting person. And she's another woman, you know, I'm so glad we're talking on International Women's Day, because she's another woman in history that I'm like, how do I not know about her? And the more I dug into her life, she's an American, and she was an international journalist, and one of the only female international journalists at the time. And she was also one of the first journalists in America to interview Hitler in Germany in the early 1930s. And she saw everything coming. If you read her writing and see some of her old speeches, she saw it coming, and she tried to sound the alarm in America before anyone else did. And, you know, at the time, America was weary from World War I. There were a lot of isolationists in terms of the politics of the time, and she could not get through to them. But she was on Drue's show several times, and you know, it was funny that the radio days, Drue's radio days, those tapes were destroyed. I couldn't find anything. I went down all these nerdy rabbit holes about radio in 1930s. And so I really had to I knew who she interviewed. I knew Dorothy Thompson was one of them. And I was so inspired by Dorothy Thompson. I had to make her a key part of the story, because if Drue's life was threatened by the Nazis because she was doing such a good job, chances are it was because Dorothy was helping her. Because Dorothy was such a strong voice in terms of America getting involved in the war.
Now, so before Germany invades, she could have gotten out. She had many chances. You know, Jacques wanted her to get out, her family, but she didn't go.
She didn't. Yeah, and then that really was amazing to me, because she, you know, here she is. You know, her life is threatened. Look, you know, we'll show some pictures, but she was. Oh,
that's right. We forgot.
Oh, that's okay. No. Well, actually, why don't I do that now? She's the stunning woman. She certainly stands out from the crowd, and yet, so it was hard for her to hide. But she just, you know, because she wanted to fight for her newly adopted country and be close to Jacques. He was off in different areas of Europe. She was determined to stay despite everyone trying to get her to leave. And so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will work. I've got Charlie on standby if not. Okay.
Yeah, what you found. I mean, look at that.
Stunning. Gorgeous. Yeah. This is another picture from her Hollywood days. I think this is one of the Charlie Chan movies. She's on the poster there. Oh, this is a short clip, very short.
Mr. Chan, have you seen Lake?
Yes.
What did he say? What did you find out?
Nothing. He is dead.
What?
Someone killed him.
And then this is her on set. This is her Doberman that she adored, and apparently terrorized some of the people on some of her movie sets. But she was very attached. There's several pictures of him. And as dog lovers, I know you're a dog lover too, Leslie. I understand. So this is Jacques Tartier. Jacques, he was also trying to be an actor, so that's his stage name, Jacques Touraine.
Very handsome.
Very handsome. And then, you know, he went off to war. Germany occupies Paris, and she stays. And she goes by instead of using the name Drue Leyton, she goes by Drue Tartier to try to stay under the radar from the Germans and have them, you know, because there was a bounty on her head. So these are some pictures from the time when Paris was occupied. And then after a time, she decided Paris was too dangerous for her, and she went and lived in this little village, charming village outside of Paris called Barbizon. And she rented this villa. It's called Villa Squirrel. You can actually still rent it on Airbnb. And it was in the middle of the village of Barbizon. And so here she made many friends and got involved in the underground network rescuing Allied flyers who had either parachuted or been bombed and had to jump out of their planes, and ended up in the middle of the French countryside. So a lot of the villagers knew she spoke English, so they would go, they would find her and say, you have to help us get them out. And that's how she got involved in the underground network. This is her in the countryside. And this is her at the end of the war celebrating with some of the flyers that she actually hid in Villa Squirrel. After the war, she wrote this autobiography, and she came back to America and toured and shared some of her stories. And she was also received many awards for her bravery. So really an extraordinary life.
And really an amazing woman.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now, she wasn't the only expatriate that you talk about in the book. You also talk about Josephine Baker, who I love, love, love.
Love.
And, Sylvia Beach.
Sylvia Beach, yes, another amazing American. Yeah, and she was actually knew both of them, which I thought was so interesting too. She was in contact with all of these really well-known people in history. Josephine Baker, of course, is the African-American entertainer adored in France till this day. And she interviewed her on her show several times. Sylvia Beach, during when she was imprisoned in the zoo, and then later in Vittel out in the mountains, Sylvia Beach was there at the same time, and they became friends. In the book, I say they were roommates. They were actually not roommates in real life in prison, but they were friends. And Sylvia, some of you are Sylvia Beach fans. I have a friend, Carrie Marr, who's a writer who just wrote a book about her called The Paris Bookseller. And
yeah, it's great.
Great book. And she was actually very good friends with Hemingway. She sold one of his very first books, and she was the first publisher of James Joyce's Ulysses in 1922. So another like trailblazing, amazing woman.
Yeah, in a time when it, wasn't the norm necessarily, or you had to fight harder.
Right.
So after she's imprisoned, she becomes a part of the underground network, the resistance, right?
She actually fakes cancer to get out of, this is not a spoiler, she fakes ovarian cancer to escape from prison in the mountains because she wanted to get out. She wanted to help the resistance, and a couple of doctors inside the prison help her. They give her drugs, and she actually almost kills herself because she takes drugs that make her look and feel very sick, so that they convince the head German doctor to let her out. So she escapes, and she takes quite a long time to recover because she was so weak. But then as soon as she was strong enough, she wanted to start helping the resistance again. And that was around the same time that Allied flyers started, dropping from the skies in Paris and beyond, and the surrounding areas. And so there were a few doctors in Paris that had started a network hiding Allied flyers in apartments, and they needed help providing food for them. They needed translation help. They needed clothing. And so one of them was friends with Drue. So that's how she got involved with the Paris network. But at the same time, villagers were also knocking on her door being like, there's a Canadian in my apple tree, like, things like that. There's a flyer in this bale of hay. Like, can you help me? We can't talk to him. Like, can you translate? And so, so she kind of got involved on both sides, and became, again, risking her life. She was already, had to go under assumed name. She had some close calls with the Germans, but it was really interesting. And she talks about this in the autobiography. They never figured it out. They never made the connection that Drue Leyton was Drue Leyton. And she talks about how she was surprised that the Germans were not as organized as she thought they were. They were not as organized and not as pervasive in France in terms of finding out people and arresting people as she thought it was going to be. And she was able to kind of hide in plain sight, which was incredible.
Yeah. So what happens to her after the war?
What happened? So she stays in France. She marries. After she goes on a tour, writes the book, shares her story, reunites with some of the flyers she helped save, which was amazing. And then I think Paris and France were her love. So she remarries and she lives in France after the war, and then moved back to California quite later on, when she was much older. But yeah, she lived. She was. Yeah, just an amazing person, and lived out her life in most of her life in France.
What year did she die? Do you know?
I want to say it was early 90s. Yeah,
Wow.
she died in her 90s. Yeah, she
Wow.
lived to be an old woman, which, given everything she went through, is really amazing.
Great. Well, I'm glad you chose her for your book.
Thank
Amazing.
you.
Jane and Leslie, there are so many readers on from Texas, Minnesota, Kansas City, Laguna Beach, Boston, Mississippi. Everybody loves Drue Leyton, and everybody is so happy. Oh, Denver, everybody is so happy that we're discussing Drue and everything she did. So let me see. We have Sandy Nichols. What does her family think of the book? And Leslie, Jane, you may want to just jump into the chat quickly and see that special message that just popped up.
Oh, from
David.
I saw that from David. I just read that as you were saying that. David Kimball Anderson, so glad that you're on. So this is amazing. When I was writing this book, I was like, she has to have some family that's still alive. And we did a search on Ancestry.com and found David, Drue's grandson, which is incredible. And then David introduced me to Drue's granddaughter, Tracy. And so they've been incredibly supportive. Because the autobiography was, again, there's not a ton about Drue out there. So the autobiography was one of the sources I had to use. And in fact, some of the pictures you just saw, Tracy was generous enough to send Drue's scrapbooks to me to scan. So we've been scanning the images so I can share them in presentations, in virtual presentations, in person presentations. So they have been wonderful. And Drue, and Tracy said that she was reading the book and so far was really loving it. So thank God for that. I'm so happy to hear that, Tracy.
Okay, from Marcia. She said, are you working on a new project?
No, my agent hoped, Alicia, my editor's on here now too. My agent and my editor hope that I am, I think. And I've started to, yes, this week, probably not a lot will get done, but after that, I think one of the best things when you're launching a new book is to get involved in the next book, just kind of have something else to focus on and not getting so stressed out about the new book being out in the world. So I can't share anything because I'm superstitious. Like, I don't want to ruin the mojo, but yes, thank you for asking.
Okay. So Russ and Beth, they want to know about Jean.
So Jean Fraise was the head of radio communications for the French government, and he was Drue's boss. And they became very close. And she mentions in the autobiography that they lived together in Barbizon while he was recovering from surgery. He was married to another woman. I'm not sure if there was a romantic connection or not. But in some of her writings, I think there might have been. And he was a really interesting, brilliant character. He was kind of a rising political star during the war. But he obviously wanted to work on the side of the resistance, and that became problematic for him working for the French government, which in the early days was kind of under the thumb of the Nazis as Vichy France in the South. So, but yeah, he was an interesting character.
Okay, and you were talking about him in another interview. He was someone's favorite. He was Lauren Margolin's favorite character, right?
Oh no! So Lauren Margolin's favorite character was Claude, who actually, Claude was also mentioned by Drue in her autobiography and her letters. He worked with her at the radio station. He was an older man in his mid-60s, and he plays a larger character in the novel than he did in her real life, because I loved his energy and his personality, and I came almost like a father figure to her. And so I just had to, and he kind of brings a little bit more lightness to some of the dark moments in the novel. I think you always have to kind of balance that out. So
yes, and you do that in all of your books so well.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, this one's from Sharon. Did you find out anything in the research for this book that will inspire you for an upcoming book? Because, everybody knows that you do that.
Right. Yes. I have, I kind of keep this running file of ideas and articles and things that people send me, and which is really great now. People send me things like, "Hey, have you heard about these girls?" or "You heard about this woman?" And so yeah, I mean, yeah, I have, and I like, again, I'm superstitious, so I don't want to share any more than that. And
you won't ask anymore.
but yeah, there's always it is funny how, like, sometimes writing is so hard you go down these research rabbit holes instead because it's more fun. And yeah, I'm always thinking, oh, what about that for another time?
Okay, so we're going to change it up for one second. This question is from me to Leslie. Leslie, what are you currently working on right now?
Yes.
I'm working on, I don't know, a lot of people don't know it, but in 2018 in Montecito, where I live, we had a big mud flow. 23 people died. So I am in the midst of that. I've probably interviewed like 50 people from everybody's points of view, from survivors to the fire department to everybody, and how big it was, and people really don't know about it. And it's just interesting and inspiring for me to hear these people's stories that are horrific.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
How is Montecito since then? I actually, Rob Lowe would post about it a lot, and I have to follow him on social media.
Well, on the 5th year anniversary of the exact day, we were all evacuated again. And we're about to get another big atmospheric river this weekend. I was just with the fire chief, and he's like, we're getting 8 inches next week. Crazy weather. But you know, I mean, there's so much to the story. It didn't have to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't have to happen.
Okay. So are you working on a new book besides like fiction?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's done. I'm hoping it gets sold before this one, because this one's going to take me a while to write, but yes.
Okay.
It has to do with my my film that should be out soon, my Grand Horizontals about courtesans.
Oh, I love it. I can't
Yeah, excellent.
I love that. All right, we have a few more questions just popped in. This one's from Susan. She wants to know if you went to Paris for research.
I did not get to go to Paris for this particular book. I did get to go because it was, still weird times a little bit when I was writing this one. I did get to go for Secret Stealers. And that was incredibly helpful for that one. And also some of the research for that one I was able to use for this one, which is great. But yeah, no, unfortunately, always need an excuse to go to Paris.
All right. So from Nancy, what did it take to recreate her voice? And how did you know when you nailed it? That's a good question.
That is an excellent question. I feel like with research, I just tried to find everything she had written, all the letters, her autobiography, watching some of her old films, even reading her interviews in newspapers. And, once I had kind of a body of material that I had gone through, you just kind of have to feel your way. I think it's, it's an instinctual thing, like an instinct thing. You have to kind of feel your way along. And so, I hope I nailed her voice. I hope I honored Drue as the person. This is Drue as a character in a novel. But yeah, I think that's one of those things. It's you kind of got to go with your gut and feel your way along as you're writing.
Well, I mean, according to what the readers are saying on this webinar, you nailed the voice.
Oh, thank you.
What happened to Drue's first husband? This question from Lynn.
So she was divorced. She married young, and she was divorced before she went to Hollywood to try to get into acting. So that was her first husband. Yeah, like in her 20s.
Okay. Okay, so Christine wants to know if Charlie, your fabulous husband Charlie, and your girls, your beautiful girls, read your books. It's from a very
where's the
what?
latest book?
What do you think?
Here it is. Thank you.
Yeah, what?
It's
So
good. Click.
Yeah, you really get going. No, so they actually listen to the audiobooks more than they read them. And but Charlie, I'll let him read a draft, like, after the first draft goes to Alicia, I'll be like, okay, now you can read it. I feel like it's tight enough. Like before that, I don't want anyone messing with my mojo, including Charlie, who's a wonderful editor. Like I just need to get it done and down, and then I let him read it. And if he has feedback, I will take that under consideration. But yeah, so they're listening to the audiobook now, which I have to give a shout out. The audiobook was narrated by an actress, Christina Klebe. She's a young actress, and she speaks French and German, and she really did a beautiful job. She really did. And they were listening in the car the other day, and they came in and they said, because I get a little freaked out listening to my audiobooks, but they said, no, she did such a wonderful job. You have to listen.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I downloaded it yesterday. And I just have to say this, I was looking at your Amazon page while you guys were talking. Maybe I shouldn't have been doing that, but I noticed that you got the #1, that orange banner up that just landed during this conversation with Leslie.
Yay!
We're currently #1 in friendship fiction on Amazon.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. See, it's because you ladies are on here with me. It's good.
No, it's because you wrote a great book.
Thank you.
Great book, great character.
Okay, so Christine also wants to know if you'll be in Texas, and then we have a final question from Mary. You going to Texas?
I will keep you posted. All my events so far are up on my website, on my events, janehealey.com, my events section. I've got a number of events coming up in New England, and then we'll see beyond the spring where I might end up. But thank you for asking. I just, I'd love to. It's just, we'll have to see how it goes.
Okay, and last, hello from Memphis. This from Mary. Just a comment, how I love these gutsy women. She says her mom was a Red Cross Club mobile driver in World War II in the Philippines, where she met her dad, who's a doctor.
No way. I love that. Oh, special place in my heart for those Red Cross Club Mobile girls after writing the Beantown Girls.
Okay, wait, she says something else. You have to send us this photo. She says her dad's cousin was a WAC in World War II, and we have a photo of her leading the women down the Champs-Élysées on D-Day.
Oh, wow. Oh, I would love to see that. If you could share that with me, I would love that.
Amazing.
Thank you. Amazing. So many amazing stories.
Okay, so we are, I think we've got everyone's questions. I want to thank you all for joining us, and especially thanks to Leslie Zemeckis.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Amazing.
Thank you. So you can visit janehealey.com. You can visit lesliezemeckis.com. And Jane's book is currently available on Amazon or Bookshop or wherever you buy your books. Leslie, how about you?
Same.
Everywhere, Amazon, Bookshop, and wherever books are sold. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Leslie and Anne-Marie. This was terrific. Have a great night. Thank you. Take care.